Welcome everyone to the Proximity Story Studio session here at the Forum, featuring our emerging leaders. My name's Erin, I'm with the Skoll Foundation, and at Skoll I run our Emerging Leaders program. The Emerging Leaders program is a joint initiative between the MasterCard and Skoll Foundations that's really focused on accelerating the growth and impact of the next generation of social entrepreneurs. Each year, we bring a group of promising social entrepreneurs to the Forum and work with them to help them hone their leadership skills, develop their networks, build relationships, and provide a platform for them to share their voices and their stories, which is why we're all here today. I was trying to think of the best way to introduce the session topic, and I think, keeping in lines with the theme of proximity, I think I'm going to try to describe to you all what being around these leaders and hearing their stories means to me. And to do that, I'm going to first take a little step back, just a little bit of a benchmark, and I'm a little bit at that point in my life where time is seeming to speed up. I feel like the older I get, the faster and faster each year seems to go by. I feel like when I was a kid, every birthday or every summer vacation or every Christmas just could not come soon enough. But now, as an adult, I feel like I'm having a birthday right now, but I just had one. I'm a little worried about blinking and missing the rest of the year and not knowing where it all went. And the thing is, it's not just me, it happens to most people. And it's because of this thing called that time is relative. And what I mean by that is when you're 5 years old, a year is 20% of your whole life. But when you're 50, it's only 2%. So it's that shrinking of time year after year that just makes you feel like time just keeps moving faster and faster. And when I first read that, I was thinking, oh, okay, I get it. Definitely relatable, a little alarming. But I don't know, what does that mean? Is that just going to be how life is? But I read that it's not necessarily the answer all the time, and you can do things to help slow time down. And the #1 way to help slow time down is to experience new things. Every single time you meet a new person or you travel to a new place or you do something you haven't done before, time moves a little slower. And it's the way our memory and our brain work. Because when you do something that you do that's routine and everyday, it just feels like your memory doesn't code it because it doesn't need it. But when you do a new experience, it remembers it, and then your perception of time and the way your life goes slows down a little bit. And I'm saying all that because that's what these leaders and their stories do for me each year. Having the chance to work with them during the week and listen to their stories and hear their experiences helps ground me and helps give me just a sense of perspective around the world. And being the chance to be their friend for the week just really lets me be present in a way that I just don't really get in my day-to-day life. And I'm saying that to all of you today because what I get out of this program, I'm really hoping each of you get out of this session. I know that we're all different, we have different backgrounds, we relate to things in different ways, but I really hope that over the course of this next hour that you take the time to feel the details in their stories, hear their nuances, and breathe their lives. And I know if you do, time will slow down a little bit and you'll end up loving them as much as I do. So, with that being said, I'll go over the format for the day. We're gonna have 3 parts. One at a time for the first part, our wonderful leaders will come up and share a piece of themselves with you. After that, we'll move on to a panel discussion where I'll ask a few follow-up questions and we'll dig a little deeper into some of the themes of the forum. And then after that, we'll have a general group discussion as a community. So as you hear their stories, please keep in the back of your mind any questions you might have, anything that you find really intriguing, or anything you're just curious about. And I promise we'll have time to discuss it all together. So without further ado, I'll introduce our first speaker. She is the Director of Digital Research and Development for Fundación Capital. Fundación Capital is a Skoll awardee, and they work to eliminate poverty by expanding access to capital. Prior to her current role, she actually co-founded her own company called Little Big Money, which was Colombia's first ever social crowdfunding platform, which is pretty awesome. Please, everyone, give a warm welcome to Antonia.
Thank you, Erin. Hello, everyone. As Erin just said, my name is Antonia. I am from Colombia. Right now, I am living in Bogota, but I was born in the coffee region of Colombia. The name of the city in which I was born is Manizales. So I remember that when I was a little kid, I used to travel frequently to our farm, my family farm, and I was to do so. I love to do so because my best friend at that time was living there. Her name was Estela, and she was the daughter of the manager of the farm. Just to give you a better context, in Colombia, when someone owns a land and they use that land as a productive land, they hired a man, this is very important, it's a man, to manage that land. And mostly of the times, that land manager is a member of a low-income rural family that wasn't able to farm their own land for many reasons. So I remember that Estela and I, we were to be inseparable. We used to be inseparable. We used to be really good friends. And I can say that we actually grew up together. So I remember that when we grew up together, we used to have a lot of things in common. We used to play the same games, and it was really fun. But at some point, after the years, we started to have a lot of differences. We were living in two completely different worlds. And at that time, I couldn't realize why that happened. So after thinking in that a lot, and something really important happened to me, and was that when I was preparing myself to went to college, she was preparing herself to be a mom. We were 18. So with saying this, I'm not saying that being a mom is a bad thing. Please don't misunderstand me. But at that time, it was really hard for me because I was able to take a decision, but she wasn't. So I asked myself at that time, why in this world there is people that have opportunities and there is other people that don't have opportunities? And I say, where this economic inequality came from. So today in my work, I am able to work with technology. And I understand that the power of technology is to allow people to access to information so they can take more informed decisions. So I tell you a better ending story with a happy ending. So during my work, I met this woman, Sonia. She is an informal entrepreneur. She works on the street. And she sells arepas. Please raise your hand if you know what is an arepa. Okay? So probably you have been in Colombia or in Venezuela. So an arepa is not a taco. That is really important. But it's also made with corn and is cooked in flour. So, okay, so the dream of Sonia, she always had a dream. And her dream was to buy a house. But she never saved money before because as she was working as an informal entrepreneur on the street, she said, hey, I'm not going to have a chance to save a penny. So she tried really hard, but she couldn't at that time. So one day, a tablet and a smart device arrived to her home, and that tablet was delivered by a leader from the community who was responsible of rotating the tablet among this rural and unconnected community. Once he delivered the tablet to her, he said to her, here you're going to find really useful information so you can improve your financial capabilities. So she was really happy with this tablet. So she took the tablet, she went to her home, and she started this self-learning course. And at that self-learning course, she found a model about savings. And inside that model, she also found a savings goal calculator. So she used that calculator to estimate the needed amount to save enough money in 1 year and pay $2,000 as the first installment for her house. So the good news is she's now living her dream. She was able to access to her house, and she is using technology to take more informed decisions. So my work is to be the head of the Digital Solutions Department in Fundación Capital, and each day our goal is to put ourselves in the shoes of others so we can co-create digital solutions that allow them to take more informed decisions. As a kid, I wasn't able to help my little friend Stella. But today, in Fundación Capital, I am able to use technology so we can close the gaps and celebrate that we are all different. Thank you.
Our next speaker is currently a full-time student at Arizona State University. When he's not being a full-time student, he's doing casual things like co-founding his own nonprofit called Strong Woman, Strong Love. And Strong Woman, Strong Love helps provide feminine hygiene products for women facing homelessness. Please, everyone, give a round of applause for Alpha.
My name is Alpha, which normally means the beginning. And coincidentally, I'm the first person on my family tree. And the reason being, when I was 14 years old, my mother, father, grandmother, and grandfather had passed away. I was left with the responsibility of taking care of my young brother and young sister. Seeing that very hard situation at hand, I spoke to a family friend who somehow, after days of convincing, loaned me a small piece of land. And I used that small piece of land to start a vegetable garden business. It wasn't an easy task, considering sometimes the rains didn't come, so it meant I would need to walk long distances to water the garden. But that garden on its own enabled me to raise enough funds for my tuition. It enabled me to be able to, fed for my young brother. And I remember at one time, the garden business was working so well because, when you're 14, 15, you don't have a right to open a bank. So I would store my money under the pillow. And at one time, the pillow started, increasing. Not that there was a lot of money, but we had inflation in the country. So it was hard for me to sleep because I had rats in the house, so they were going to eat on my savings, literally. So to me, that was my introduction to the world of social entrepreneurship. So when I got a MasterCard Foundation scholarship to come and study in the US, I found myself gravitating towards working, volunteering with a nonprofit that has something to do with people that had a need that was supposed to be met. So I started volunteering with Under House, which is a nonprofit that offers food and sleeping. It offers food and bathing services to people that are facing homelessness. So one day when I was doing my usual chore, I used to clean the bathrooms. It's a long story. I'll tell you some other time why. I was busy hammering to the song of Drake, busy cleaning my room with my earphones on. Then there was a large bang on the door. At the moment, I was freaked out, but I opened the door. And there was one of the clients, the homeless women there are called clients, or the homeless, any homeless person, they're actually referred to as clients, which is a human thing. So she was yelling at me, I need to use the room real quick. Please, can you step out? I stepped out, continued listening to Drake, but waiting 10 meters away so that when she comes out, I would try to understand what the situation was. So when she came out, feeling a little bit better, she told me that my menstrual cycle had kicked in. Because this place doesn't provide feminine hygienic products, I was in such a hurry. That hit me hard, because remembering that as a college student, most of my spectacular shopping, I do it at the $1 shop. So I remember seeing the feminine hygienic products at the $1 shop. So I ran, took my bank card, ran to the $1 shop, bought 40 feminine hygienic products. And when I was by the checkout, the lady looked at me with a very concerning eye. He was like, young man, 40 is too much. And I just laughed and took the products to the shelter. The following week when I went back, she was different. She told me something happened. They have feminine hygienic products here. And I smiled, but I didn't tell her I was the one who did it. So that was actually the birth of Strong Women, Strong Love. The fact that I had time to listen to someone in need. Even though, to me, I wasn't someone who uses the feminine hygienic products, but the fact that I cared about an issue that at some time doesn't concern me made me to even, be able to make a change. So Strong Women, Strong Love operates both in Phoenix and in Uganda. In Uganda, we had a different approach. First, because there are no $1 shops, everything is kind of expensive. So in Uganda, we actually partner with one of the safe houses, which is more like a non-profit, which is more like a non-profit shelter, where we teach women how to make feminine hygienic products, but in this case, they'll be making reusable feminine hygienic products. And then after they go through the training, some of the products that are made, they're actually sold for a profit, so that they're able to keep something at the same time, get feminine hygienic products that they can use. So to me, one challenge that I learned was that even though I was listening to Drake's song, which is a little irrelevant, the fact that I listened to what someone had experienced actually made me to begin making the impact that is happening today. So it all started by listening to Drake's song and cleaning that room. So my last words will be, even though something doesn't concern you, if everyone in this world starts to care about things that don't concern them, trust me, a lot of things are going to change. The fact that someone is dying in a particular country that I don't know of, that I'm not related to, is, if I begin caring about that, it means a lot of people will care about so many different things, and so many solutions will start. My goal in life is a reduction in non-profits, because all the problems would have eradicated. Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is a senior technical advisor for VillageReach. VillageReach is also a Skoll awardee and works to increase healthcare access to underserved communities in sub-Saharan Africa. On top of all that, she is actually our first leader that's a doctor. So everyone, please give a warm welcome for Bvudzai.
Thanks, Erin, for that introduction. Hi, everyone. So I grew up on a farm in rural Zimbabwe, a farm that my parents owned. And it wasn't unusual for, my parents every time and again to take one of the farm workers to the nearest health center. Someone had an emergency, a lady got into premature labor, for example, or something else happened. They either had to take someone to a health center or arrange for someone to take a sick farm worker. And so for me, I was always aware from an early age that there are some people who are disadvantaged, either by their geographical location or by other factors, who do not have access to healthcare. And so when I launched my career into global public health, I naturally was interested in the issues of access. And so I started working on various issues on access to health services, access to medicines, and so forth. 9 weeks actually ago, I got a reminder of this experience that I lived through as a young child. I was in Congo doing some work because our organization works there. And our team in Congo was called to an emergency meeting because the health facilities were stocked out of vaccines for children. And so we went for this meeting one evening. We came up with an interim solution, and we were all pleased. And so we walked out of that place feeling satisfied. And as we were preparing to leave and walking in the dark, I stepped into a water drain. And so I injured my right leg. I was rushed to the nearest health center. I got some care, but they told me that they don't have an X-ray machine. And probably I might get an X-ray machine somewhere else the following day. And so the following day, the search started for a place to get an X-ray. The first place we were told, they have a machine, but they are out of X-ray film. The second place we were told, the technician also broke his hand and is out of town. And so we were left with one more place. We arrived there with a sense of desperation, and the technician said, yes, I can help you. That was a sense of relief. And so he said, but we use car batteries to start our X-ray machine. And so they tried on 2 of their car batteries and the machine wouldn't start. So they asked to use our car battery. And we gave it to them. The X-ray machine started. And at least that was a relief. The technician did what they do and took an X-ray, and we sat there for a while, maybe 2 hours, and we got the X-ray film back. I took the X-ray film to the doctors. It was a group of about 4 doctors. They sat with this X-ray machine, with this X-ray that I'm holding right here. And they said, unfortunately, such poor quality, we can't even see what happened. There was no other option for me in that area to get another X-ray. The next flight out of that place was 4 days after my injury. So despite efforts to get me out of that place, nothing worked. So I waited for those 4 days and then flew out of there and got better medical care. So why do I care about the things that I care about? This experience actually reminded me that the issue of access, although it has been spoken about for so long, is still very much real. I couldn't get access to care, although I had some money in my pocket. Not everybody can make 3 or 4 trips until they get healthcare. For some people, if they don't get service once, that's it. And so the work that we do as VillageReach inspires me in that our mission is to save lives and to provide, to ensure that the most disadvantaged get access to quality healthcare. I had an X-ray, but the quality was poor. So it's about accessing the service, and it's about the quality of the service. And those are the things that we care about. There were a couple of other lessons that I learned from this experience. The first thing for me was that we're probably working in the right area, because this is an area where it's really hard to get any kind of service. And so for me, that gave me a sense of reassurance that we're actually working in the right place. The other issue that came to my mind as a health systems and policy researcher was really around how we measure progress. And I know that, as social entrepreneurs, we have indicators, whatever measures we use to measure progress. And I was thinking as I was in that place, what does success look like in this place? And it reminded me that success, yes, the measurements are important, but the context is more so very important. Because what you do in one place, if you do the very same thing in another place, you can get very different results. And so I started thinking, because we have sort of just launched our work in DRC, it's not as old as the other places where we've worked, I thought that you probably need to put 2 or 3 times more effort to get success in this area. And I think it's important for all of us as we reflect on our successes and as we look at those indicators that we care about, that we don't just look at how many, and how many, that we actually take into account the context in which we're working, because everything that we do has a story behind it. The other final lesson that I learned from that experience was how the health system is really fragmented. I had just concluded a meeting to address another public health challenge because the health facilities were stocked out of vaccines for children. And yet, when I was now looking for an X-ray service, the health facility was also stocked out of X-ray films. So for me, this kind of fragmentation where we're each interested in particular issues and sort of forgetting the person as a whole. That, you know, human beings, the same person who requires a vaccine for their child is the same person who requires an X-ray when they get injured. And I was thinking, how can the health system better serve the people? We need a more integrated system, which is holistic and can serve the interests of the people as a whole. And so this is why I urge everybody who is here today that the issue of access is still very real. And this reflection that I had made me realize that I am advantaged in many ways and that other people still need better access to healthcare. Thank you.
Give me a hug. Oh, shoot, sorry. So our final speaker for our panel today is currently a project manager for Our Voices. She actually has quite the storytelling background. Both her parents are teachers turned documentary filmmakers, and she herself is currently filming a documentary capturing the dropout rates of Indigenous communities in Canada. She's amazing, her story is amazing. Please, everyone, give a really warm welcome for Angela.
Bvudzai. Angela Code Husie, Saisi Dene Hesley. Tasu Uli Twe Hotzi, Whitehorse Yukon Nasted, Sinia Si Masinastan. My name is Angela Code, and I am a member of the Saisi Dene First Nation. I'm originally from a small community called Tiduli Lake, Manitoba, and it's in the far north of Canada. I was born in Churchill, Manitoba, which is known as the polar bear capital of the world. So it's quite cold. I currently live in Whitehorse, Yukon, which is next to Alaska, for those of you who may not be familiar with Canadian geography. And yeah, I work for a company, an organization called Our Voices. And what Our Voices works towards is the empowerment of Indigenous youth. And we do that through efforts in revitalizing Indigenous languages and cultures and land-based education. And I realized that in meeting all these wonderful people here, a part of the Emerging Leaders Fellowship, is that many people around the world do not know about Indigenous issues within Canada. And many people, even within Canada, don't know about Indigenous issues. And so in telling my story about who I am, maybe it'll give you a little insight as to why we at Our Voices do the work that we do. And so I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Tiduli Lake is a very small community, and its original name is Tesa'uli Twe, and that means floating ashes on the water. And Tiduli is a fly-in only community, and it's very expensive to get there. It's very expensive to live. There's not a lot of fresh fruit and vegetables, and yeah, there's not enough opportunities for the people there. And that's part of the reason why my parents chose to leave the reserve to move to Whitehorse, Yukon, so that my brother Mike and I might get a better opportunity to receive a good education and recreation opportunities, just like all other Canadians, because that's not available on most reserves in Canada. Again, maybe many of you don't know, like, Canada is a first world country, but there are people who live in third world conditions there. And I grew up without running water, and we used to take a dog team to go to school. And I never thought that I was poor growing up, because everybody else in the community lived just the way that I did. And we didn't have a lot of fancy things or whatever, but we always had food, and we always had good clothes, and we had love in our family and our community. And I grew up hunting and fishing on our land, and that's very important to me as an Indigenous person. And you'll find the more that you learn about Indigenous peoples, we have a very strong connection to our territory. And you know, just last year, Canada celebrated 150 years of being a country, but I'm here to tell you that it's much older than that. Our people have lived on our territory for thousands of years, and the caribou have sustained our people for thousands of years. And we hold them with the utmost respect. And today, we have to fight in order to protect things like caribou and fresh water. And we have to work to revitalize our languages, our values, our cultures, because Canada has systemically oppressed us. And it's continuing to this day. And if you learn anything about Canada, I urge you to learn more about the Indian Act and Indian residential schools and how that's impacted our communities today. Because today, many of our people are suffering. There's many socioeconomic crises, and many people are living in poverty. And that needs to change, and that's what Our Voices is working towards. And for myself, when I was 13 years old, I shot my first caribou. And my parents were so proud of me. They told so many people, oh, like, did you hear Angela shot her first caribou? And I was so embarrassed because I was like, do you have to tell them it was my first caribou? Because I have two older brothers, and you know they shot their first caribou when they were 9 or 10. And so, anyways, it took a few years until I realized that it's not actually that common to shoot your first caribou at 13, let alone a girl. And so now that's a source of pride for me. And I'll just tell you a quick story about what hunting means to me that I think is a huge misconception, particularly in Europe, and why hunting cultures are important. So I'm not a religious person. I'm not Christian, I'm not Jewish, I'm not Muslim, and but I have spirituality. And a lot of that comes from hunting. You learn a lot about life and death. And when I was 13, I remember we were hiking out in the mountains, and we were looking down in this valley, and we saw the herd of caribou. And I chose the one that I wanted to kill. And it was a young, fat bull. And I knew it would be tasty. And so I lined up, and my dad told me, he's like, okay, Ange, like, you know, do the kill shot, breathe, let half your breath out, hold it, and shoot. And it seemed like, you know, as Erin was talking about time, it seemed like time had slowed down in those moments. And in those moments, you see an animal that's alive and well, and in an instant, it's gone. You drop it, and you did that. It's your responsibility, your action that caused that. And as we walked up to that caribou, I could see that it was still alive, and you can't start cutting it up because it might kick you or something. And so in watching that caribou, and you could see the life of it leave its eyes, it's almost as if watching its spirit leave its body. And in that moment, I was incredibly grateful for that caribou, for the skills that I had, for my father, for my ancestors. And it was an incredibly humbling experience. And you know, I think that's what you know, religion is about, is to be grateful for your life. And you know, so in watching that, I learned a big lesson. And I think that despite all the hardships that our people go through, it's important to remain grateful. And one of the sayings that my mom has always told me was, Sik ezi sahe athlu nathiris nadli masinistan. And that means the sun is up over me, I wake up again, and I'm grateful. And it's very simple, but it's I think that it's something to keep in mind in this line of work that we do in social entrepreneurship, in trying to make the world a better place. The problems can be overwhelming sometimes, but it's important to take those moments to be grateful. And I'm very grateful to be here today amongst all of you. And thank you to the Skoll for having me. And I'm really grateful for Our Voices, for the work that we do as an organization, because we are working towards making sure that Indigenous people, young Indigenous people, are strong. And I think that it's important work, and I think that all the work that you guys do is very important as well. So thank you very much.
So first, I want to say thank you to all of you. It's hard enough to give a speech. I think it's even more difficult to open yourself up as a person and share a piece of you with the community. So I'm just thank you both. Thank you all so much. For the first topic, I wanted to piggyback on Sally and her opening plenary and talk a little bit more about the power of proximity. And any of you feel free to jump in, but I'll direct questions, then feel free to, if you have ads or a different perspective. But my first question actually is for Bvudzai, because I feel like for VillageReach, being proximate and closing the distance is like a core part of your mission and your organization. So would you mind just talking a little bit about how you view proximity and how you bring it into your work?
Yeah, great question. Am I on? Thanks, Erin. You're very right. Being proximate is very much a part, of our core mission, because we are trying to reach out to the people who would otherwise miss out on healthcare. And there are a couple of ways in which we do this. One of the things that comes to mind immediately is how we partner with government and other stakeholders on the ground to really try to identify the issues, the barriers to accessing healthcare, and then come up with a solution that is really inclusive of many stakeholders who are working on the ground. For us, the government is a very important stakeholder because we recognize that the government will probably be there for a very long time. So we do our work with a view to ultimately transition and hand over what we do to the government, because they do have the mechanisms in place to connect with the communities. That is one thing. A second thing that comes to mind actually is how we are working towards using technology to keep that proximity. We are very interested to know what's happening in the communities where we are working, and we have some solutions that we use to capture information. And our teams currently are working very hard to ensure that that data, what we call visual analytics, that it's really available so that people, in some sense, even when they are not right in the field, on the ground, they can continue to be proximate in some sense, if I can use that word, and know what is happening in the community. So those are some of the issues that come to mind immediately.
I was thinking last night during the opening plenary too, they talked about how men need to be involved in women's rights and women's equality. And I mean, it's the first thing that popped in my mind was actually Alpha, because I mean, he's actually a man working exclusively on a woman's issue. I wanted to hold his hand and go, right here, we have someone case in point. So Alpha, I was hoping if you'd be willing to share with everyone just your thoughts around how men can be more proximate to women's issues, or what about, you make it seem like no die would do that, but this is obviously something that doesn't happen enough. So just any of your thoughts around that?
I think for me it is very important that, like the last statement I say, that even if an issue doesn't affect you directly, or is something that you are not concerned about, but caring for those things actually enables progress to happen. My view basically on this issue is that, for example, as someone who comes from Zimbabwe, it is culturally a taboo to talk about menstrual periods and later on go and buy pads or go and buy feminine hygiene products. But if you look at it, I have a young sister, and I'll also have probably a son or a daughter in future, and or even my brother will have a daughter in future. Literally, at one point, that conversation is going to happen. And I feel like the reason why most problems are so hard to solve today is because people turn a blind eye towards them. They say culturally it's wrong to talk about this, but even if you talk about it, nothing changes. I have been doing it for a long time, and with some of the people saying, some of the negative things. But one thing I always tell them that even though what you think I'm saying is a taboo, what if your daughter approaches you and asks and begins to have a conversation about that topic? Are you going to throw them away? Are you going to need to marry someone else in order for them to talk to your daughter about something like that? So it's very important that if you start now to be engaged in the issues like that, it makes your world even much more better. You begin to understand the reason why the issues of sexual assault are important. You begin to start caring and understanding about those issues even more. So to me, I always say, even if something does not affect you directly, even if I do not use feminine hygienic products, it doesn't mean that if someone is using them, I must not care about them. You're supposed to care about the things that do not concern you. So thank you.
I love that. And, when I think of caring about things and issues, a large part of why this program exists is through the foil and the power of storytelling and being able to close that gap and being able to articulate and create empathy from a distance. And I have a question for Angela, because you're a filmmaker, you're a storyteller yourself, and your parents are. And whether it's you or your parents or your family's approach to filmmaking, does proximity or reaching the audience come in mind at all? And if so, how?
Well, I think I'm really proud of my parents. Their names are Alan and Mary Code. And I really look up to them because they've told many stories that wouldn't have been told if they didn't tell them. And so one film that they made in particular that I really hold dear to me is it's called Nuhonie, and it means our story. And they talk about the history of our people, of the Saisi Dene. And it's a tough story to tell, but it was the reality for my people. And it's still a story that many people don't know. And with the power of telling stories, of telling your own story, and to do it through film or through whatever medium, it's reaching out past your community. It's perhaps touching somebody that is outside of your circle, and that creates change, and for the better, I think. And I think that it's a really powerful thing to be able to know who you are and where you come from, and to be able to tell your own story in a good way. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd even say more than just the film, just you being at the forum. I don't know how many people have come up to you already saying, I didn't know, thank you for being here, thank you for sharing your story. It's just, you'd be surprised what one person in one conference can really do. So thank you so much. Tonya, I actually had a question. What's interesting about Fundación Capital to me is that when I think of finance, I don't necessarily think of proximity. I don't know why. The two things don't necessarily click in my mind. But in a way that is kind of what they do, because it's building proximity or bridging the gap at like the access to capital, because not everyone has that. So would you mind just talking about the proximity gap when it comes to capital and like what your organization does around that?
Okay, yeah, finance is not an easy issue. Okay, if you think in your lives, in you day by day, you need capital for everything. I mean, it's to access to good, to let your kids go to school in some countries, and I don't know, it's something really important in our lives, and sometimes we put a stigma on that, right? But in low-income families, what we found is that they're not asking for money, right? They are asking for opportunities to have access to information so they can manage better the money that they have. I always say this because in most of the programs, mostly on the financial inclusion programs, what happens is that the government of the social sector just create a program and deliver the program to the person and just knock the door and say, hey, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. So I think that that is the wrong way, because the people say, hey, I know how to save. Probably if we compare the amount that you save and the amount that I save, probably I am able to save more than you, and you're not a good saver. So that's why I think it's really important to be really close to the population and don't think that we know the answer to their questions. No, what we need to do is sit down with them and understand which are the problems that they're facing and let them know how to solve them. And I think in terms of finance, it happens the same. When you have a financial advisor, probably is that what a financial advisor do. Even a psychologist do that for you. So I think that's really when we are able to be close to them. But it's really hard to do that in person. I mean, it's something that is really, the cost is really high. So we are not able to do that with all the people around the world, with all the low-income population around the world. And that's why we use the technology, because we think that there is something that is already inside in our hands. And we use the technology for many things, but they use the technology for taking more informed decisions. And I think that it's very important in terms of finance.
Cool. I want to shift gears a little bit, and I wanted to cover a different topic because we are the emerging leaders. So I kind of wanted to touch base on the role with youth in shaping and being leaders in our future. And this first question is for Alpha and/or Angela. Take your pick. Because, you know, leading as somebody who founded your own company and someone who's already a filmmaker, you're thrust into leadership roles at a very young age. And just from your perspective, have you come across any problems or stigmas or any maybe not taken as credible as older people?
You could go first.
Okay, thank you. Problems. Yeah, I've met a lot of problems, especially because my definition of leadership is a little bit different. To me, being a leader doesn't mean I'm supposed to be, 8 years old. Yes, I know with age comes wisdom, but sometimes I might be just 20 and be wisdom enough and learning. Because, for me, if you want to be wise, you need to associate with mainly people that are associated with wisdom. So you spend most of your time learning from the older people on how they were doing things. So in most cases, I had to, learn about the different things. Like, if there is a problem, you do not just think you're the one who has a solution to it. It's very important to sit down and listen. Listen to the view of the person who is really basically talking about the problem and understand where they are coming from. And if you have your view and you are part of a team and you are a very good leader, it is very important that you have the last say. Why am I saying that? You need to sit down and first listen to what the others are saying. And through those ideas, it can make your idea even better. So to me, I always try to separate what I do with basically separate my leadership in terms of going to school, because I'm a student myself, and also being a leader in the nonprofit. So in the nonprofit, I'm wearing another different hat that is a little bit unfriendly, but also with the view that says that because even though I'm a college student, right, the experience that I've faced so much in life, growing up without anyone to look up to, failing 100 times, doing the work 10 times more than what a normal person doing, it taught me a lot of things. It made me to understand that everyone out there is a relative to me. Everyone out there is a parent to me. So to me, I didn't really, yes, it's an emotional thing that I, grew up without all those fundamental figures. But one amazing thing I learned from it is I opened up to so many people and allowed to learn from so many different people. And that, in case, actually made me a much better person. And I remember at one time when I was going to buy bread at one of the shops growing up, I was so happy because I hadn't ate the day before. So I bought just a loaf. And when I was going out the shop, there was this older man. He was lying on the floor. And then I stopped by him saying, "Are you all right?" He said, I'm traveling to Botswana, and I need someone to take me to I need someone to take me to the place where like we grab the buses to. So I went out. I walked with him, and then even offered him. And then I actually gave him the bread that I had. Deep down, I was saying, you know, I really needed the bread, but at that particular moment, I saw someone who probably needed it more than I did. So I gave him the bread, and we kept him going. So before he boarded, he told me one thing. He said, "Young man, the fact that you were able to stop for me and take me here, this is something I don't see in so many people. Please do not change whoever you are. Always be someone who listens." So to me, my leadership is mainly about listening rather than about talking, because through that, I am sure I'm able to achieve a lot. Thank you.
Angela?
Okay, so like I said, I come from a very small community, Tuduli Lake, and the education is not great there. And so I was fortunate that my parents were able to move us kids to Whitehorse so that I could finish high school and be on par with the rest of Canada. You know, when I graduated from high school in Whitehorse, I had like 24 family members from my reserve take the bus all the way to another territory to see me graduate from high school. It was a big deal. And yeah, it's not a big deal to many people in Canada. It's pretty predictable to graduate from high school. It's common, but it's not for Indigenous people. There's a very high high school dropout rate, and there's very few people who actually go on to post-secondary education. And I went to post-secondary. I went to UBC in Vancouver. And that had a lot of challenges for me because here I was at a white Western academic institution. And my major was in First Nation Studies and my minor was in First Nation Languages and Linguistics. And it was a great program, but I was a minority in that school. And there were times where I didn't want to be there. I wanted to drop out because I think a lot of Indigenous students have this feeling like you're kind of torn and you're pushed by people saying like, go to school, get your education, get a good job. But you're also told, learn your language, learn your culture, spend time with your elders, be out on the land. And so you're kind of in these two worlds. And while I was at university, within the first couple of years, I lost a few family members that were very dear to me. And one of them was my late Uncle Isaac. And he was like a second father to me. He taught me a lot about hunting and being out in the bush and about resilience because he went through a really tough life. He went through all kinds of abuses at Indian residential school, but yet he was so funny. He was hilarious. And, you know, that just showed to me an incredible strength and something that I hope to carry with my life, throughout my life. And but the thing was, when he died, I left school for a while, and I just wanted to be back home and spend time with my family, and to learn from my people the things that I would never learn in a Western academic institution. And so one of the challenges, I think, in being a young Indigenous person in this day and age is to be able to walk in these two worlds, because it is very different ideologies, worldviews, and values. And you know, there's a Dogrib woman, Chinchon woman from Northwest Territories who said it so eloquently, saying that one of the biggest challenges for Indigenous youth today is that you have to be strong like two people. And that can be quite burdensome sometimes because, yeah, you need all kinds of different skills to be successful in this day and age. And so, yeah, that's one of the challenges, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question too for Bvudzai and Antonia, because I think where Alpha and Angela are more entrepreneur, Bvudzai and Antonia are both entrepreneurs working within a big NGO. And I just have a general question as somebody who, or to two people who are entrepreneurs, how do you lead from within a big organization and how do you get that kind of change?
Okay, I'll go first. Thanks. I think for me, leading within an organization is very much about relationships with people. We work, you know, our teams are very diverse, and so, but I think our values in terms of what we're trying to achieve are the same. And so for me, it's been trying to navigate how best to cultivate what I think are sort of the soft issues, because the hard issues we all have, or the technical skills, we all have our different technical skills, but it's often those soft issues in terms of how we relate with each other and how we communicate and how we build trust, things that are sort of not written in ink, but are very important in terms of how we lead others. Yeah.
Okay, so please don't say this to my boss, but I am I am always really happy because I am learning with others' money, right? So that's it. That's a huge opportunity if you want to be an entrepreneur. So being an entrepreneur inside Fundación Capital let me understand that there is a social sector, right? That is in charge to deliver those goods and services that the private sector is not able to do, right? Why? Because it's not a good business. So working in Fundación Capital and being an NGO, we are trying, and that's part of my job inside Fundación Capital, we are trying to transform an NGO into a social enterprise. So we are trying to understand how to transform social programs into social sustainable programs, how we can do so. So it was an amazing experience to have that opportunity. And I think that we as the social sector, we really should try to understand how we can have a sustainable business model in the work that we do. Because it's a really good example, and I would like to take the story that Angela was telling. It's like when you have the fishes of the caribou. If you don't find a way to do that sustainable, then the fishes are going to be gone one day, or the caribou, and you are going to be able to eat more. So I think that same happens with international cooperation, and we need to understand how to make this sector something sustainable. And again, technology, in my opinion, it's a highway to do it.
Cool. I definitely want to get to Q&A from the audience. One last question for all four of you in one sentence. I'm serious, one sentence. Just as a takeaway for everyone in the room, if you want them to leave with one thing to know about you, your work, just anything, this is your chance. One sentence, though. Take a moment. Go. 1, 2. Maybe I'll start with Angela. Antonia seems very concentrated. You got it? Okay. One sentence. Go.
Problem, solution, business model.
Alpha.
Worry about things that do not concern you sometimes.
Bvudzai.
I think for me, I would say let's work collectively.
I would say learn, educate yourself, and have empathy.
Great. Thank you all so much. And what? Oh, yeah. So we have a few minutes left. So I don't know if there's any questions from the audience, but at this time, please. It doesn't have to be questions. It can be things that resonated or things that interest you, anything that you're curious about. But there are any questions? Raise your hand. Oh, let's see one. Oh, they need one of them.
Hi, my name is Ria. I'm about to be starting college in the fall, so my question is probably directed more towards Alpha. I'm just curious, as someone else who has aspirations to create change, not only on my small communal level, but my bigger community. So I'm wondering how you find balance and how you manage the work that you're doing as an entrepreneur with your education, with academics.
I think it's possible, even though it's sometimes challenging. But as an entrepreneur, you always have a network of friends. And also, through having the network of friends, when you create the project that you're working on, you realize that you need to create a strong team. And you are not supposed to, like, if something happens to you, it's not supposed to happen to the organization. And having that separation actually helps. Right now, I am here away from school and away from my organizations, even though I'm doing many projects, like many phone calls and other press releases online. But then my team back there is actually working very well. So you need to have that team that you trust, that team that you train and understand yourself, that there is a demarcation between you and your education. And my honest truth is, it is very important to always educate yourself as a leader. Read more, go do the masters, go to the PhD, because when you get up there, you even meet different people, and then and at the same time do something that you're passionate about. I would say it's very possible. You can do it.
Sorry.
Okay, so my name is Noura. Thank you for the interventions. I think what I really liked about the stories that you shared was that some of them were actually lived experiences. You actually lived through some of the issues that you're working on. In the case of Alpha, it's proximate lived experience, so that was really nice. My question is, from your proximity, and you all do your work very collaboratively, was there a situation where you expected some way that your collaborators or others would act, think, do, and you were caught by surprise, positively or negatively?
So at one time, there was another businessman that that was interested in what I was doing. And then we had a meeting, and we were really connecting at a different level. But then one thing that he said that actually, I felt uncomfortable with was, he said that, you know what, you are very good at, I like the way you talk. I will give this much money to your organization, but I want you to start appearing in the adverts that I want to be doing, and using your unique story and your unique the organization that you're working with. To me, one thing that I told him, I was like, you cannot make me a marketing thing, and at the same time, I cannot start marketing. I cannot start using Strong Women, Strong Love as something that I'm marketing. These are people that are affected by this. You see, so one thing that I say that sometimes money is involved, but as a leader, you don't need to be taken away by the money. You need to know the core thing, the core reason why you're doing this. So that's how I was able to, say, if the deal is for you to donate and then we use the money, I would agree. But if you want me to start exploiting what I'm doing for the benefit of your company in relation to the passion that I'm doing, then I said, in that case, no.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Raj Siraj. I'm from Toronto, Canada, traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee. My question is for Angela. So a few friends and I got together last year, and we started a project where we take over soon-to-be-demolished properties. We started with commercial property in Toronto. Toronto's a sort of a city that's evolving very fast, gentrified quite rapidly. Whole neighborhoods are being transformed within a few years. People are being displaced, businesses are being closed down. So we took over commercial properties and converted them to immersive art experiences. And now we're moving to residential spaces, so homes that have been bought but will be demolished in 3 weeks. So we invite the artistic community, we convert the entire space into immersive experience. Through art, we ask the important questions of urbanization, gentrification, displacement, who belongs where. And the idea is after 3 weeks, the homes are gone. So it's a very transient, but hopefully a very embedded experience for people. We've had some difficulties engaging the indigenous communities. And of course, there's a lot of hurt and a lot of pain. And there's a lot of education that we have to take upon ourselves, so we're not passing the burden on to the indigenous peoples. As an artist yourself, how would you want to be engaged in building a new fabric or a new story, a historical story, but from a new narrative about a city?
Well, Canada is a very big country, and I haven't spent a lot of time in cities, to be honest, but I do know about displacement, and I do know about land dispossession, and like our people, the Saisi Dene, went through one of the worst government forced relocations in Canadian history, and I know how much that move has affected our people in a very negative way. And so I can kind of understand the sentiment of the people who are displaced from their homes in the cities. And I think for the art projects that you're doing, I think essentially you're asking me how would you engage more Indigenous people to participate. Yeah, I guess in just getting to know them, like hearing their stories about displacement or relocation, and trying to find out like what those sentiments are, what those feelings are, and what that looks like for them. And I don't know, like it's a really tough question for you to ask, because you know, like I said, Canada is such a large country, and Indigenous peoples are so diverse. And you know, like the peoples who inhabit Toronto and the people who are from there, like the Indigenous peoples, like you gotta seek them out and listen to their stories and build that trust to participate and to take up that space. And I don't know, that's all I can say.
We have time for 2 more questions, I think you. And did you have a question? Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Vandré Brilhante from Brazil, and I have a question for you all. If we were to start a youth initiative program in your own communities, how would you do it? Any specific point to highlight? If you were to start a youth initiative program on your communities, how would you do it? What would you care more about?
Okay, I would like to answer that question. There is a super good methodology, human-centered design, and I love that methodology because when you use it, and also I think it answers a little bit of his question, you are able to listen to people that it's involved in the problem. So if you are able to understand which is the problem or which are the problems that a community is facing, and you highlight those problems, and then you facilitate a conversation around how to find solutions, but solutions from them and for them, right? Then you're going to be able to build or to test one of those solutions. So I think that that's the best approach you can take, because in the old model, we used to create the solutions in our places, we say in the table in the big cities, and then deliver those to them. And I think that is a huge mistake.
One last question.
Okay, my name's Rick Spence. I'm a journalist from Toronto. Wondering if you guys who are here sort of representing the new leaders, the emerging leaders, the future, if you could ask the social entrepreneur community, you know, to do one thing differently or to do something special to help you guys get more traction in your careers and your projects and programs, what would you ask for?
I think for me as an emerging leader, I would say that there are other leaders who've already emerged. So we need spaces of intergenerational leadership where we can share experiences and we can also learn from others who have led in these spaces or even different spaces before. So having those forums for sort of sharing experiences for me is something that will be critical.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a moment. I have this document here that my organization, Our Voices, put together along with Dana Nawo, based in Northwest Territories, and Kanak from Nunavut. And it's called We Are One Mind, Perspectives from Emerging Indigenous Leaders on the Arctic Policy Framework. And what this document is about, essentially, here are our voices about what should happen in the North and like for us. And so I think that one of the messages is like nothing for us without us. You know, consultation is a very big part, communication and understanding. And so these are things that we see necessary as Northerners. And so often it's people in Ottawa or you know, other major parts of Canada in the South that make decisions on the North for us without any real conversation. And so I think that that's the key thing is just the engagement and to actually listen, you know, and I think that's a common theme today is just like listen to the people and yeah, see what their needs are and facilitate them in their empowerment. Like don't do it for anybody, just do it with them, you know?
Antonia wants to say something, just real quick, because we're almost out of time.
Yeah. I will, answering to your questions, I would say that regulation is not friend of innovation. And in the social sector for us, it's really hard to innovate and at the same time go against the regulation. And in my sector, which is fintech, that is something really relevant.
Thank you all so much for coming. One last thing before you leave, if you could fill out your evaluation forms on your table with any questions or comments, I'd greatly appreciate it. Other than that, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your forum.